Hey everyone, and welcome to my review for Game of Thrones, Season 7, Episode 5, Eastwatch. So where do I begin with this? I've heard some people saying this was a slow episode or speaking negatively about it, but I didn't see it that way at all. I absolutely love this episode. It's my second favorite of this season, and had some of my favorite scenes in the entire series. But as I'll talk about in a bit, there was one very specific reason why I love this episode so much. And I'm not even talking about the final scene, which also blew my mind. So let's jump right into it with my top 5 moments of the night. At number 5, there was the moment between Jon Snow and Drogon, when he reached out and touched the creature, and it looked at him, and seemed to sense he was a friend, likely because of Jon's Targaryen blood. We're really getting a sense now of just how smart these dragons are, and how attuned they are to those of Valyrian blood. From the books, we know of a case during the Dance of the Dragon Civil War, when Queen Helaena went mad after losing a child, and killed herself by throwing herself from a window. Meanwhile, her dragon Dreamfire was locked away in the dragon pit, but sensed the death and roared so loudly she snapped some of the chains holding her bound. So now seeing Drogon recognize Jon and obey Daenerys so precisely really makes me excited to see all 3 dragons in action, hopefully each with their own rider. At number 4, I chose the conversation between Sam and Gilly, where she casually mentions that High Septon Maynard once recorded the annulment of Rhaegar's marriage to Elia Martell so he might marry Lyanna Stark in a secret ceremony in Dorne. The implications of such an arrangement might have drastic repercussions for the continent, so it was especially funny seeing Sam ignoring what she said. The marriage of Rhaegar and Lyanna means that there are now 3 and possibly 4 strong claimants to the Iron Throne, though who exactly is more legitimate at this point is irrelevant in my mind, since I feel like the person with the strongest army at the end is going to be king or queen, regardless of their lineage. But that being said, the viable claimants at this point are Jon Snow, last living male child of Rhaegar Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne under the Mad King Aerys II. Then there is Jon's aunt, Daenerys, younger sister of Rhaegar, and if following traditional Targaryen succession practices, she can only inherit the throne if no other males exist in her family. The third claimant is Cersei Lannister, wife of King Robert and mother of King Joffrey and King Tommen. Although her claim may not be seen as strong, her relationship to previous kings and years spent as queen make her an acceptable choice by many. And since she currently sits the Iron Throne with a loyal army at her back, it is impossible to deny her claim. Finally, I believe Gendry, last living son of Robert Baratheon, also has a claim, though because he is a bastard never recognized by his father, he likely would get little support. However, there is some chance Jon Snow, as king in the north, can make him legitimate, just how Stannis wanted to do for Jon years earlier, before he became Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. At number 3, there is the burning of Randyll and Dickon Tarly. I thought this was a very powerful scene, and I completely understand Lord Tarly's reasons for not submitting to Daenerys. She definitely is a foreign invader as far as I'm concerned. The Targaryens, in my opinion, have no business ruling Westeros, so I feel that Randyll Tarly died with honor, as did his son, who clearly was not meant to reveal himself, and was given permission to bend the knee by his father, but still would not. At the same time, I found it funny that Daenerys acted like she was giving the soldiers a real choice, and I find it crazy to believe that those men she terrified into kneeling will really be loyal to her. Loyalty bought at the point of dragonfire is not real loyalty in my opinion. I do, however, agree that Randyll and Dickon Tarly needed to die. It is a war after all, and they will not serve Daenerys. However, they should have been executed quietly, in a manner befitting their status as nobles, and given proper funeral rites. Not because they were such great people, but because that's how a dignified ruler deals with enemies. Burning father and son alive by dragonfire is far more reminiscent of the Mad King, who tortured and killed Rickon Stark and his son. Not to mention that she did it in front of terrified soldiers, who will now go all over the continent, spreading rumors about the Mad Queen, who appears to be just as cruel and crazy as her father. Now, she isn't really like her father, but many of these people have heard nothing but terrible things about Dany's family for their entire lives. And then when they finally see her in person, she is at the head of a foreign army, roasting their leaders alive and demanding loyalty at the point of death. At number 2, we are finally getting to the scenes that, for me, took this episode to another level. Watching Jon Snow gather his companions together and head out beyond the wall put a giant smile on my face, as I thought about the last hero from the books, who during the previous long night set out with a sword, a dog, a horse, and a dozen companions, searching for the children of the forest, so they might help them fight the war against the White Walkers. Jon appears to be taking on the role of the last hero, marching beyond the wall with a sword and some companions. But this scene would have been made even better if Ghost had finally re-emerged to join them on the mission. I also found it odd Jon did not send ravens to Castle Black, asking for rangers to join them at Eastwatch. In addition, I find Tyrion's plan of bringing back an undead creature to convince Cersei into signing a truce to be a pretty crazy idea. I mean, first of all, I don't think Cersei will believe them even if they do bring a White South. After all, one of her Kingsguard is basically a walking corpse, and if Qyburn could do that, what's to stop Dany and Jon from finding a sorcerer to make them an undead creature for the presentation? Further, even if Cersei did believe them and agrees to the deal, she will almost certainly take the first opportunity to betray them, no matter the consequences. In my mind, a good plan would be for Cersei to agree to the deal, send her remaining soldiers north at the same time as Daenerys, then sneakily bring in the Golden Company or other mercenaries to quickly conquer the undefended south, while the armies of Westeros fight in the north. However, none of this took away from the amazing feeling of watching Jon and his crew journey on an epic quest beyond the wall. Finally, at the #1 spot, and the reason I love this episode so much, was the re-emergence of Gendry, bastard son of Robert Baratheon. Robert Baratheon may very well be my favorite character in the entire A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones universe. The story of him standing up for himself, his friends, and his family, taking down the mad Targaryen king and his heir, is something I absolutely love, and nothing makes me smile more than thinking about the great warrior Robert Baratheon smashing his warhammer into the chest of Rhaegar, whose actions had sent the continent into an uproar, paving the way for Robert's rebellion. Although we now know that Lyanna likely went with Rhaegar voluntarily, and that perhaps they were in love, in my mind it does not change what Rhaegar did, abandoning his family and publicly going after the betrothed of another, then running away together, leaving the Mad King to torture and kill the Starks, leaving thousands to die in the war that followed. And so Robert Baratheon has always been a character I absolutely loved, and I even loved that he recognized his own faults as king and left the realm to be governed by Jon Arryn. But now, seeing Gendry, who probably looks a lot like a young Robert Baratheon, wielding a warhammer like his father and becoming friends with Jon Snow, it's like watching Robert and Ned Stark in their youth, with even old Davos Seaworth acting like a Jon Arryn type, guiding them and watching their backs. Seeing Gendry become the new Robert Baratheon also leads me to believe that if he survives, he may become Lord of the Stormlands when the war is over. Some quick notes about the episode. I was shocked to see how disloyal the Northerners are. What happened to the North remembers, and Lord Glover saying he would regret not being loyal to Jon for the rest of his life after the Battle of the Bastards. To see his bannermen so ready to abandon him was very upsetting, made even worse when Sansa seemed to be enjoying their praise, and did not stand up for Jon in any meaningful way, and so I was happy to see Arya confront her and call her out on her clear ambitions. But then Arya also took it too far, talking about beheading bannermen. I'm glad to see she's so loyal to Jon, but Arya definitely needs to think more about the consequences of her actions. After seeing the death of the Tarlys, it seems like Sam will take up their family seat in the future. However, his vows to the Night's Watch may make that difficult, though I imagine there's some chance the Night's Watch won't even exist by the time the war is over, leaving him free to take the holding. Now for the best kill of the night. It obviously goes to the Tarlys being consumed by dragonfire. And even though I hated watching a father and son burn alive, you can't deny this scene was epic and impactful. The best line of the night goes to Gendry when he was speaking to Jon Snow about their fathers, and while Jon's biological father was a Targaryen, since Eddard Stark raised him, I will always consider him Ned's son, and so was thrilled to hear them getting along so well. After mentioning that Jon was raised on stories about their fathers, Gendry responds, "All I ever knew was that they fought together and won. Sir Davos told me where you're going, your grace, and why. Let me come with you." Overall, I gave this episode a 9 out of 10 and really enjoyed it. But what did you guys think? Do you agree with me that this was one of the best episodes this season? Or are you in the camp that sees this as a weak episode? Or in between? Please let me know in the comments below. And remember to watch the weekly recap video, already up. See you next time. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Tormus Woods Whisperer, Ryanon, and Joey Lady Phoenician. If you'd like to help the channel with a monthly donation, click on the Patreon link, and please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to see more.